Hello everyone, I'm Eddie Studer with Capitalize Analytics, and I'm here to talk to you today about connecting your different data sources to Alteryx, and this is going to be the first video in a series of videos on this topic. And what we need to start out with today is DCM, or Data Connection Manager. This is Alteryx's basically data source repository. I would strongly suggest always using DCM when building new data connections in the Alteryx platform, whether it be server or designer. Reason why for that is these connections built in DCM can be utilized in both directions, whether you're running the workflow locally in designer or you're running the workflow up in your server environment. If you don't have server now, I would still strongly suggest always making your data connections or creating your data connections in DCM, because if your company ever does get server, those are the only data connections that can be utilized in both places with just a synchronization of your DCM with gallery. So first things first, bringing in a data connection tool or input tool, data tool or output data tool based on the direction you're going. So, data sources like Power BI or Tableau output sources, they are going to utilize an output data tool, but your input data tools, your SQL, your whatever connection you're using to bring your data into your workflow obviously requires an input data tool rather than an output. But then outputting, these connections are different. Doesn't matter if they're the same technology. Like if you're using SharePoint, the SharePoint input tool is completely different and separated from a SharePoint output tool. So if you're building or when you're building these data connections in DCM, understand that it may be a good idea for naming convention to make sure that you label the input tool as an input tool or the output tool as an output tool, because you're going to need to understand when you're maybe having to update a password or whatever, that you don't want to update the wrong one. So to get to DCM, or the easiest way to get to DCM as far as I'm concerned, is bring in an input data tool and then just check this, make sure this box is checked here. You may not have a checkbox, that's okay. That just means that your designer is set up for DCM only. Mine is not, mine is set up as DCM optional, that's just my preference. But if you don't, that's okay. Hit setup connection right here, and you're going to be presented with this data connections window. In here, you're going to have a few options. Recent, which will show any recent data connections that you have made. Saved, if you have any favorites saved. Files are strictly for if you want to bring in a file directly from a file share. If you are using Designer only locally, that can include your C drive or any data drives you have on your local machine. Otherwise, it'll always be something like / server name / folder name / folder name / file name dot extension, whatever that may be. Data sources, though, is your location for DCM connections. Server comes later. I'll have a completely separate video about server data connections. Those are all done on the admin side in the gallery. But for this particular video, we're not going to talk about that. Data sources, though, you click on data sources, it's going to present you, Alteryx is going to present you with a list here. You have your top ones are your basics, Oracles and SQL Server. You have all your different options there, whether you're quick connect using quick connect, which is basically a DSN-less type of connection, or OCI, ODBC, OLEDB, whatever flavor of those type of connector you want to connect with. And then you're presented with your entire list of other third-party, basically, connectors. Your AWS connections, Box, Databricks connections, all your Microsoft products, whether it be your analytics platform or data lake or OneDrive or SharePoint or SQL Server. You can have MongoDB if you want to connect directly to the MongoDB you have, or if you're connecting to the MongoDB that's part of your server environment, this is where you can make those connections. There is a lot here to choose from. Once you have created your DCM connection. If you're using server along with your designer, there is another component of DCM that you need to keep in mind. Just because you've made the connection locally in your designer does not mean the DCM up in server knows what that is. So you need to make sure you perform a synchronization between the two environments. Again, if you're not using server, you don't really have to worry about this part, but I'm going to show it anyways for the purpose of this video. So you've made your DCM connection, or maybe you want to just find your DCM connections you've already created. You can hit File up here in the upper left, hit Manage Connections, and this brings up your connection manager with all these different data connections that you have created. Now it's time to sync. You want to choose Synchronize. It's going to present you with your company's server. You click on the company's server's name, and that will bring up the list of data connections that you have not synchronized yet. You would take a look at it, just make sure that everything looks right. If it does, there's another synchronize button that will show up in this window on the upper right, and that will synchronize these data connections with that environment. Once you've hit synchronize, everything's synced between the two environments. You can create workflows using those DCM connections here on Designer, save them up into the server, which would generally then become your workflow repository. And those DCM connections will work in both locations. It doesn't matter where you click run. It will work locally. It'll work there using the same connection. Now to find those DCM connections up in server, I'm going to show you that right now. Nope, we don't want to save that. Let's get rid of it. So here is what the DCM in server looks like. So you're up here in your server environment, and you choose DCM data sources, and it's going to list out all the data sources that you have created in your DCM up in gallery. And this is exactly what it looks like. You can click on a data source if you wanted, like here's my G drive, and it'll present you with the data source, what you named it, what technology is being used, and any credentials that have been added to that data source for authentication purposes. Whatever's needed. For different data connections, it's going to be different things. We'll go over that. I'm going to do other videos when it comes to all the different data sources, SharePoint, Google Drive, Databricks, you name it, I'll be going over it. But this is DCM in a nutshell. I would strongly suggest using DCM for your data connections. It'll make it much easier on you. The data connections will already be created. If I come back over here to Designer, and I'll give it a second as Designer comes up. Come on, Designer. As you see, I'm running 24.2. I'm one version behind. 25.2 should be coming out here soon. 25.1 came out in May. So when it comes time, come on. And you want to use a data connection that you already have. You can hunt down the connectors if you'd like. Alteryx is very smart though. It knows that you have the connector. And if you don't have the connector, it will automatically redirect you to a browser, take you out to the Alteryx marketplace, and then you can choose the connector version that you need and install it into your designer. Another thing you need to be aware of if and when you are using these third-party tools, SharePoint, OneDrive, Power BI, Tableau, whatever it may be, the same data connection has to be installed on the server environment as well. And it has to be installed as admin, just something to be aware of. So you choose your data connection, and say we want to use, let's use SharePoint. That's a popular one. So you've got your SharePoint here. It'll automatically search for the tool because it knows you have it installed, and it will change this input data source to the correct connector. Come on. Yep, there we go. So now you've got your SharePoint tool here. This is what we chose. This is another thing I was telling you. So everything below the OR is just ad hoc connections. They are not DCM. If you make anything here, if you make any data connections in this area, they are only good for this moment. They do not get saved. You have to hit setup connection above the OR in order to create a DCM or choose one you have already created. So in this case, say I would choose my SharePoint input files. If we wanted to choose a new one, we could. So it would bring it up. You can make your choices and then save it. And then you could choose your, here, you know what, let's just do this for the sake of, so you've got your SharePoint test, and now I want to set a set of credentials to it. If you have credentials saved already, you can do that. Otherwise, you would choose the type of authentication method you want to use. You would create your credentials for that, apply them to your data connection, and then hit link. This would then create that data connection credential. The credentials get stored over here in this credentials area. The data sources get stored here. Whatever credentials are attached to this data source, you can actually make changes to those credentials without disturbing the data source itself. Once they're saved here, they automatically propagate to the data connections they're applied to. When you're up in server and you have a bunch of workflows that have, say they have all these SharePoint connectors with them, and you're like, oh wow, now I've got to go through, say your password changed, or your secret changed, and now you've got to replace it all. Not a problem. You can either replace it here, or you can replace it up in DCM in the gallery, and as soon as you replace it and perform a synchronize, it will automatically propagate across all of the workflows that data connection is used in. And so you don't have to worry about opening every single workflow, every single data connection, and changing it out. You don't have to deal with any of that. Alteryx is smart. It understands you shouldn't have to do that. DCM will take care of it for you once the change is made and a synchronization is performed. Just something to be aware of. Something's real nice to use. But that's DCM in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like, hit the bell and subscribe so you don't miss the next one in the series. Thank you all for joining me today, and I will see you on the next one.